When I was a kid, I remember walking into my living room and seeing The Empire Strikes Back playing on the TV, and I found myself so captivated by this weird little green guy talking to Luke about the magical energy field that surrounds us all, before then demonstrating the awesome power of this force for our main character to see by lifting the X-Wing out of the water. And I can't say this as an absolute fact, but this is my earliest memory I have of watching Star Wars, so I often credit this moment as my introduction to an IP that would shape a great deal of my life and mold my love for storytelling as a craft. That one little scene where a dyslexic frog lectures a blonde guy about what is and isn't possible is what gripped me and turned me into a lifelong Star Wars fan. So believe me when I say, this scene means a lot to me. As the years have gone by, I've thought about this scene a lot, and what exactly Yoda's lesson to Luke means. Mainly because I'm coming to realize a lot of people seem to have taken the wrong lesson away from it. Luke tried to lift the X-Wing out of the water, but ultimately couldn't do it because it was too big, only for Yoda to tell him that that doesn't matter, and uses himself as a prime example not to let the size of a thing determine what is and isn't possible. He lifts the ship out of the bog to show Luke that even though he's small and the X-Wing is massive, through the Force you can achieve things you never even imagined. But what a lot of people seem to have interpreted by the wording "size matters not" is that it doesn't matter how big a thing is, the Force is always bigger, and therefore you can move anything you want to if you simply believe in yourself. And this is not true. Now don't get me wrong, I can see how one might come to that conclusion based on the way Yoda phrases this tautology, to the point where I myself believed that's what he was saying for a long time. In fact, if you go back to my second Kenobi video, you'll see a moment where I used my false interpretation of this scene to make a point that, believe it or not, was actually in defense of the show. We'll circle back to that later. So I'm not here to tell you that everyone else is wrong and I'm the only one who knows what's up. You should all listen to me, I have all the answers. No, I got it wrong too, but after thinking about it more and really analyzing the implications it would have on the canon if that interpretation was actually correct, I've realized what Yoda was actually saying. And to be fair, I'm sure a lot of you out there already understood it this whole time and you don't need me to explain it to you. So this video is really just for those who don't get it. People like, say, someone who argues that it makes total sense for a Force wielder to be able to pull a ship out of the sky while it's in flight and headed in the opposite direction from where that person is standing. Because after all, Yoda said that if you believe it's possible, then size makes absolutely no difference at all. So I want to take a deeper look at what Yoda actually says, as well as what actually happens in the scene.
Master, moving stones around is one thing. This is totally different.
No different. Only different in your mind.
Okay, yes, right there, it seems like the literal interpretation of Yoda's words is that there isn't any logistical difference between the stones and the ship, because I can do all things through the Force who gives me strength. But there's more to it than that. The Force is a powerful energy field, yes, and if you could tap into its full power with no limits whatsoever, then yes, you could do just about anything. Because it's the dominant force in the universe whose reach is practically limitless, and if one single person were able to channel all that power, then the size of any given object wouldn't matter at all, be it a small stone, a starship, or even a celestial body.
Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.
However, it doesn't matter who you are. Whether you're a Padawan in training, the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, or the Chosen One himself. Everyone has limits. There are limits to your Force potential. There are limits to your physical potential that stunts how powerful you might be in any given moment when calling upon the Force. Results will vary, but yes, even with the Force as your ally, you are still just one person, and you can only do so much. The scene itself even shows Yoda struggling when he levitates the X-Wing across the swamp and puts it down on the ground, because despite the fact that he's exceptionally powerful even for a Jedi, and despite the fact that he's fully in tune with the Force and has surrendered himself entirely to its currents, there are still limits to what he can do. And in that sense, size is a factor, because yes, the Force gives you the ability to achieve feats that you could never hope to physically pull off. There's no way Yoda is picking the X-Wing up and carrying it out of the swamp with his bare hands.
Luminous beings, Zoe. Not this crude matter.
But it is possible through the Force, although there are limits. Just like how the ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the Force, and yet Palpatine and Vader still need to build a super weapon to do that because they can't do it themselves. Two of the most powerful Sith Lords to ever live, and they can't do it themselves. They're limited as well. But why is that? If the common interpretation of the scene is to be believed, and a Force wielder really can lift any object no matter its size, then why can't Palpatine or Vader destroy a planet by themselves? Why not just use the Force to implode it from a safe distance, or push it so far out of its Goldilocks zone that it freezes from being too far away from its star? Why do they need to spend 20 years and countless resources building a machine to do what they should be able to do themselves? This is what I mean when I say the implications on the canon are severely damaged if the common understanding of Yoda's speech is to even be humored. It's the same reason why Force wielders can't stop a ship from flying away from them with the Force. Ships are still massive objects that move really fast. If one of the most powerful Jedi who ever lived was having trouble with a tiny little X-Wing that wasn't even actively flying, then there's absolutely no way Vader is doing this. People don't understand why this doesn't work, and then those people get hired by Lucasfilm to write for their projects, and you end up with shit like this. Jesus Christ. And we can continue down this rabbit hole all day long. Why don't various characters across the films pull ships out of the sky as they're flying away, if that's something they can apparently do? Why does Yoda struggle to keep the pillar afloat and levitate it safely away from falling on Anakin and Obi-Wan? Dooku meant for that to be a distraction that would give himself enough time to escape, but if the Force works the way people are interpreting it to work, it shouldn't have taken Yoda more than a second or two to push it away and continue the fight. Why doesn't Kanan simply push the fire far enough away so that they can all get away? Through the Force, all things are possible, and size isn't a factor anyway, so this really should have just been no biggie. I think people just generally downplay how powerful a feat telekinesis is supposed to be in the Star Wars world. Like, I remember making fun of that really dumb scene in The Mandalorian where Baby Yoda throws the Praetorian Guards around like ragdolls, because, I mean, obviously. But of course, the usual suspects on Twitter acted like smug assholes about it and said that Grogu is using a very basic feat that even the most rank-and-file Padawans have access to. And to be fair, there's never really been a consistency to whether or not Force users can and should simply lift their opponents off the ground, but I just want you to understand that if you're going with this argument, that actually just makes The Last Jedi even worse, because that means Rey and Kylo could have done that the entire time and just didn't. The Praetorian Guards apparently have no defense against this kind of attack, to the point where a literal fucking baby can do this to them, but the nephew of Luke Skywalker and one of the most powerful beings to ever live just didn't think of that, I guess. Yeah, sequel fans stay winning. I'm hammering this point home because I really want it to be clear why this interpretation of Yoda's words can't work. So let's look at it a different way. The actual point of the scene itself revolves around Luke and what he's capable of accomplishing as long as he clears his mind and dismisses his previous notions about how the world works.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
He believes the task is impossible because, according to his own understanding of the laws of physics, there's an obvious difference between lifting a few stones and pulling a ship out of the water. If he can't do it with his own muscles, then it can't be done. Yoda realizes he has to do the deed himself to prove to Luke the only thing stopping him is his state of mind. And when he sets the ship down on the bank, we get this great exchange.
I don't believe it.
That is why you fail.
Luke learns a valuable lesson here about how the Force truly is beyond common understanding, and that if he opens himself up to it, he'll find he's capable of things he never imagined. But that does not mean that he can do anything, and I don't think that was ever what the scene was going for. Yoda tells Luke that there's no difference between lifting rocks and lifting a ship, but what he clearly means by that is that both are doable if you surrender yourself to the Force, not that they're the exact same level of difficulty despite the obvious size difference. But the fact that lifting the X-Wing is more difficult than lifting rocks doesn't actually undermine Yoda's lesson, because what Luke learned isn't contingent on that being the case. Now, I mentioned earlier how I initially used my original faulty understanding of this moment to defend a scene in Kenobi, so before I close this video out, I'd like to revisit the context of that argument so I can revise that particular part of my video. Congrats, Kenobi. You're so bad that even on the rare occasion where I try to defend you, I end up being wrong. Basically, I argued that it's actually totally fine for Obi-Wan to be able to do this during his final battle against Vader, because I, like most people, believed size matters not extended to literally everything, no matter how big. It doesn't matter that these are multiple giant boulders that Obi-Wan is levitating. The Force makes it possible. But now that we have a better understanding of how this works, I can officially say, Yeah, this is dumb. Just like Rey lifting all those boulders in TLJ is dumb, which is another thing I defended at this part because of my failure to understand Yoda's lesson. Obi-Wan is one of the more powerful Jedi from the Old Order, but he's not this powerful. Again, if even Yoda couldn't lift the X-Wing without struggling a little bit, and an arguably more powerful and in his prime Yoda struggled to catch this falling rebel in Episode 2, then Obi-Wan ain't pulling this shit. Especially since this is a version of Obi-Wan who's only recently regained access to the Force after cutting himself off for like a decade, and who has pulled off countless other bullshit feats since getting it back. God, this show fucking sucks. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say. I've just been getting really tired of constantly having the size matters not argument thrown in my face every time I call bullshit on some ridiculously overpowered feat pulled off in one of the new Disney things. So it'd be a lot more convenient to have this video I can easily link explaining all of this. Also, I'd like to mention for anyone who's curious that yes, I have watched The Acolyte, and yes, I will be covering it as usual. As I record this, they've released 2 episodes so far, and they're not very good, so expect a video on it when the full show is out. In the meantime, you can check out my live streams that I do with Jolly, where we painstakingly break down all the new Star Wars shows in way more depth than I'm willing to do for a fully edited video. The first stream will be out on Sunday, and might already be out by the time I release this video. Who knows? But otherwise, that's all the time we've got for today, so I'm gonna pretend like I wrote a clever outro for this part, and fade dramatically to black now. See ya!